Hi, friends. I'm Father Kerry Walters, pastor of Holy Spirit American National Catholic Church, and this is another Holy Spirit moment. The late 16th and early 17th philosopher Francis Bacon famously quipped that some books are to be merely tasted, and other books are to be devoured, and still other books are to be chewed and digested slowly. What he didn't say is that some books, if they are chewed and digested slowly, give rise to a horrible case of intellectual and perhaps spiritual indigestion. And I raise this possibility with you because it seems to me that a recently published book, the Benedict Option by a Christian who calls himself conservative, orthodox, and traditional, the book entitled The Benedict Option, is precisely one of those books that gives rise to horrible indigestion, and I think is going to cause a great deal of damage. And I'd like to share with you today my reasons for saying so. This book has been highly anticipated. We've known that Dreher has been working on this book for some time. It was released in March of 2017. His conviction is that we are living in a culture that is not friendly to Christian values, and that in order for Christians to maintain our identity, what we need to do is to offer an alternative to the culture in which we live. That's not a new message. That's been a message that's been around since the very earliest days of the Church. In fact, the person who has inspired Dreher in this book, Saint Benedict of Nursia, the 4th century founder of European monasticism, said precisely that about his own day. Now, Dreher believes that Benedict can provide us with some standards for maintaining our Christian identity, standards that are found in the rule that Benedict wrote for his monks. I think Dreher does well to point out that these rules of St. Benedict are good guideposts for Christian comportment in the world. These standards include, for example, the discipline of prayer, the discipline of work, the discipline of stability and of fellowship. These are all good. Where things begin to go wrong in Dreher's book is when he tries to explain what he takes to be the culture against which Christians must resist, and in the process maintain our identity. It becomes really clear really soon that the prime target in this book is what Dreher considers to be rampant sexual immorality. It is a theme that runs from practically the first page of the book through to the last page of the book. And it is so incessant, so present in the book, that it almost can be said to be an obsession with Dreher. The Benedict Option seems to be focused upon a sexual obsession, or an obsession with sexuality might be a better way of putting it. Dreher says that the culture in which Christians live is one that has been sparked by the sexual revolution of the 1960s. In one of the most extraordinary claims that I have ever read anywhere, Dreher says this. He says, in the last 700 years, there have been 5 revolutions which have stripped Western civilization of its traditional Christian faith. One of them, for example, was the Reformation, according to Dreher. Another one was the Industrial Revolution. A third was the Enlightenment. And a fourth, and the latest one, according to Dreher, is the sexual revolution of the 1960s. How anyone could argue that the sexual revolution of the 1960s has had the influence that the Industrial Revolution or the Enlightenment or the Reformation has had absolutely boggles the mind. But nonetheless, this is the claim that Dreher bases his case upon. And what does he mean by the sexual revolution? Well, he seems to mean what he considers to be an immoral loosening up of sexual mores that the church or Christians in general are being infected by. Everything from birth control to LGBT agenda, as Dreher calls it, to the transgender revolution, as he refers to it, is a product of the sexual revolution of the 1960s. He fears that Christians are entering into a dark age in which they will be actively persecuted by the government for exercising their quote-unquote religious liberty, their quote-unquote rights of religious conscience to resist sexual immorality. This is an overwrought thesis, and one of the telltale signs that it's overwrought, that it is obsessed with sexuality, is that Dreher doesn't even mention all of the other aspects of our contemporary culture that you would think Christians would want to resist. We are ambassadors of Christ, as St. Paul tells us. And what Christ did during his life on earth was to teach virtues such as kindness and mercy and compassion and forbearance. What he argued for and demonstrated in his own life was that to be a Christian in the world is to act in such a way as to resist violence and cutthroat competition. It's to exercise the downwardly mobile option instead of the upwardly mobile option. It's to resist the allure of power and wealth. And it's to do something in the service of those people who have been in one way or another oppressed by power and wealth. Dreher makes no mention of any of this. It's as if racism and poverty and arms races and wars and interpersonal violence simply take second and third and eighth place to the sexual immorality with which he is obsessed. Dreher calls himself, as I mentioned at the beginning of my remarks, a traditional or conservative or orthodox with a little o Christian. And in so saying, he seems to hijack Christianity. He seems to be saying that anyone who doesn't agree with his insistence that the biggest enemy of Christianity today is the LGBT agenda is somehow unorthodox, is heterodox, isn't a genuine or true believing Christian. This strikes me as not only mistaken, but as pernicious, because what it seems to do is to disenfranchise Christians who are more concerned with problems that Jesus would have directly addressed himself to than to the typical conservative Christian in America obsession with sexuality. Rod Dreher takes his inspiration from a 1981 book written by the philosopher Alasdair MacIntyre entitled After Virtue. It's an incredibly good book, and I highly do recommend, to go back to Francis Bacon, that if you haven't read it, you do so. You read it slowly, you digest it thoroughly. At the end of that book, Alasdair MacIntyre says that he worries about the fragmentation of Western secular culture, and he hopes that sooner or later a new Benedict will come along to somehow guide Christians back to a proper understanding of what it means to be a disciple of Christ. Rod Dreher thinks that he is that new Benedict, or that at least he is offering the world, or at least American Christians, the agenda that Alasdair MacIntyre was hoping for back in 1981. But my friends, he has not offered that agenda. What he has done is to display between the covers of a book the worst tendencies of American conservative Christianity. I'm Father Kerry Walters, and this has been another Holy Spirit Moment. You can find all of our videos at www.holyspiritmoments.org. Until next time, take care and God bless.